But if you decide to stay, know this. Some roads lead to more than destinations. Some roads lead to nightmares that never end. I'm about to tell you something you never dreamed could happen. If you have the courage, listen closely. It starts on a cold October night, the kind when the wind bites through the thin walls of a weary roadside motel, the kind that swallows hope whole. Route 66 is dotted with relics, ghost towns where the laughter of travelers once echoed. Among these relics sits the old Blue Mirage Motel, barely clinging to life, beside a stretch of cracked pavement. Most locals avoid it, whispering warnings about Room 7. They say the room's been cursed since the night a family vanished without a trace over 50 years ago. But I was a skeptic, desperate for shelter after my car broke down, and I didn't believe in curses. That night, I pulled off the highway as darkness crept over the desert fields. The motel's flickering sign buzzed like a dying neon heartbeat. The clerk's eyes were too large, his smile too forced when I asked for a room. Room 7's the last one left, he said, his voice quivering ever so slightly. Made sure you're okay with that? I nodded. I had no choice. The room smelled musty, damp carpet, faded wallpaper curling like dead skin. The air felt thick, like it was holding its breath. The small television glowed with static, casting eerie shadows on the cracked ceiling. I shrugged off the growing unease and prepared for sleep. Around midnight, strange noises woke me. The creak of floorboards outside the door, a dragging sound, like something heavy scraping the linoleum. At first, I thought maybe a rodent, but then I heard a voice, or what sounded like a voice, whispering my name, faint but insistent. I forced myself to check the hallway. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting long wavering shards of light. No one was there. The air was cold, colder than outside, and I smelled something metallic, like blood, heart hammering. I closed the door and locked it. The bed suddenly felt like a trap. My skin prickled, a crawling sensation that refused to fade. Shadows materialized in the corners of the room, refusing to stay still, coalescing into shapes that twisted and writhed. I realized these weren't mere shadows, they were memories. I called the clerk downstairs, but my phone showed no signal. I banged on the door until it shook. He came up, eyes wide with something like fear or pity. "You should have listened," he said quietly. "The Mirage keeps its guests as souvenirs." I demanded explanation, but he only smiled sadly. "That family years ago, they were here just like you. When the sun set, the room took them, took their souls. Now the room waits, it feeds." I didn't want to believe him, but the air thickened, and the whispers became desperate cries. I felt invisible hands clutching at me, pulling me toward the corner. I scrambled to the window and threw it open. The cold desert wind slammed in, scattering the whispers into the night. Dawn came slowly. When the morning clerk arrived, he found room 7 empty. No sign of me or my belongings, only an old tattered photograph on the pillow, a family smiling under a Route 66 sign. I was never seen again, so if you ever find yourself driving down Route 66, watch for the Blue Mirage Motel, and whatever you do, avoid room 7, because the darkness there isn't just absence of light, it's a trap for the living, waiting patiently for its next guest. If you hear it whisper your name, don't answer. That's the truth. They don't want you to know. Believe me, or don't. But if you decide to stay, know this. Some roads lead to more than destinations. Some roads lead to nightmares that never end.
In another city, far from the places we think we know, there is a story that people whisper about but rarely dare to put into writing. They call it a true story, passed from mouth to mouth like a fragile secret that corrodes the soul of whoever carries it. It begins not with a scream, but with silence. Silence so deep that you feel it pressing against your chest, choking you slowly as if invisible hands were closing around your throat. In another city, where the lights on the streets flickered more than they glowed, there was a family who had just moved into a crumbling house at the edge of a neighborhood most people avoided. The rent was cheap, and the family thought they had found a blessing in disguise. But the neighbors, quiet and pale-faced, kept their distance. They didn't greet, didn't warn, didn't speak of what the house had seen. The family believed they had found opportunity, but in truth, they had been welcomed into something much older than stone and wood. The first night was the worst, though they didn't yet know it. The mother swore she heard footsteps dragging across the hallway outside their bedroom. Heavy steps, the kind of weight you imagine belongs to someone far larger than a man. She shook her husband awake, but when he listened, the sound was gone. He laughed it off, said it was old pipes, the house settling, the usual excuses. But she knew what she had heard. The children complained too. Shadows sliding under their door even though the hall was empty. Voices that whispered names none of them had ever heard. On the second night, the father went to the basement to check the fuse box after the lights cut out. He found it cold down there, unnaturally cold, as if the very air had been drained of warmth. He carried a flashlight, but it sputtered, and in that brief stuttering glow, he swore he saw something etched into the far wall. Words, scratched deep into the stone with fingernails or something sharper. He couldn't bring himself to read them fully, but he caught fragments. Do not, alive, never sleep. When the light blinked back on, the wall was bare, smooth, as if nothing had ever been carved there. The days grew worse. The children no longer played. They sat in corners, wide-eyed, staring at nothing. When asked, they said they were listening to the man. The parents tried to laugh it off, but deep down they were afraid. The mother found her daughter. The father dreamed of the basement stairs, walking down, step by step, until he saw bodies stacked against the wall. Their mouths wide, eyes open, skin gray and stretched. They whispered his name, begged him to join them. The mother dreamed of fire, but no heat, flames that crawled along the walls and ceiling, devouring the house without sound, while figures with broken limbs danced silently in the glow. The children screamed in their sleep, clutching their throats, and when the parents shook them awake, they found bruises forming as if invisible fingers had pressed into their necks. The house began to change too. Doors that had been painted shut now swung open. A smell, rotting, damp, like soil soaked with blood, rose from beneath the floorboards. At times, the walls seemed to breathe, swelling and shrinking as if the house itself had lungs. In the silence of night, you could hear a heartbeat, steady and slow, echoing from the foundation. They tried to deny it, but the family could feel it. The house was alive. One evening, the father brought in an old man from down the street, hoping maybe the neighbors would share what they knew. The old man entered reluctantly, crossing himself at the doorway. He refused to sit, refused to touch anything. He looked around, his eyes darting from corner to corner, then whispered only one thing. "It does not want you here. It never wanted anyone here. Not since the fire." The father pressed him, demanded answers, but the old man only repeated the same words. "Fire. Never wanted. Leave." Then he walked out, muttering prayers, and did not look back. That night, the fire alarms blared. The family rushed to the living room, but there was no smoke, no flames. Only the walls glowing faintly red, as though lit from inside. The glow pulsed, throbbed like flesh. The father tried to touch it, but his hand came away wet, smeared with something dark that smelled of iron. The children began to cry, and the youngest screamed, "He's in the walls! He's coming out!" At dawn, the mother found muddy footprints leading from the basement to each of their beds. The prints were too large to be any of theirs, the toes long and claw-like, dragging as though the thing that made them had been crawling. None of the doors or windows had been broken. Something had come up from beneath. They tried to leave, packed bags, threw clothes into suitcases, loaded the car. But the car wouldn't start. The engine roared and died, until the battery drained. They tried calling for help, but their phones had no signal, though the rest of the street had service. The neighbors stood in their windows, watching silently, pale faces pressed to glass. But no one came to the door, no one offered help. It was as though the entire neighborhood was complicit, as though they were waiting. And then the children began to change. They no longer played, no longer spoke much at all, except to answer questions with words that didn't sound like theirs. The mother caught her son carving into the wooden floorboards with a kitchen knife. When she pulled him away, she saw he had written the same phrase again and again, hundreds of times. In the fire, in the fire, in the fire. His hands bled from gripping the knife too tightly, but he didn't even flinch. The daughter, meanwhile, stood at the window each night, whispering. The mother pressed her ear to the glass one evening and froze. There was a voice on the other side. Not the wind, not imagination. A deep, guttural voice answering her child, syllables twisting in ways no human throat could form. She dragged the girl away, but the voice kept whispering, even after the window was shut. The basement door would not stay locked. Every night, no matter how many times the father bolted it, chained it, even nailed boards across it, by morning the door would stand ajar, darkness yawning below. And every morning, the smell was stronger. The last night came like a storm, though the sky was clear. The family heard footsteps circling the house, dozens of them, as though a crowd marched around and around. But when the father peered outside, there was nothing. Then the walls began to shake. The children screamed. The basement door slammed open, and the air grew colder than ice. From the darkness below, two eyes appeared, yellow, lidless, unblinking. A voice whispered up, 1,000 voices layered into one. Join us in the fire. The mother grabbed the children. The father tried to bar the door, but something climbed. Pale arms, too long, too thin, clawed their way onto the floor. The walls pulsed with light, as if veins beneath the plaster were glowing. The family ran, stumbling, clawing at locked doors that should have opened. Windows sealed themselves with invisible hands. The house throbbed, the heart beat faster now, faster, louder, until it drowned out their screams. No one knows exactly what happened after that. Some say the family was never seen again, that the neighbors woke to find the house empty, furniture untouched, meals still warm on the table. Others claim they saw shadows moving behind the windows for weeks after, though the house had been abandoned. The official record says nothing. No missing persons report, no investigation. The house simply stood there, waiting. And it still stands, though no one goes near. The walls are blackened, as though scorched from within, though the fire department insists there was never a blaze. Passers-by swear they hear whispers if they stop too long on the sidewalk, voices calling softly, promising warmth, promising peace, promising fire. In another city, far from where you are reading this, the house still waits. Some say it feeds on families. Others say it is the family itself, trapped and screaming inside, calling for new voices to join them. And sometimes, on nights when the street is quiet and the air smells faintly of smoke, you can hear them. Not in the city of the story, but here where you sit. Because once you know the story, once you've let the words settle inside you, the house is no longer there. It is everywhere. Because once you know the story, once you've let the words settle inside you, the house is no longer there. It is everywhere.